All right. The last thing we have to go over is standard form. Standard form is the least useful type of way of writing a linear equation, but you need to know it because it's required, essentially. It works like this. So it's when you have an equation set up where x and y are on the same side, unlike y equals mx plus b, like that, where y was isolated or something like that. In this form, everything is written on one side and it equals 0. Sometimes you'll see it written this way. That's essentially the same thing. C can be on either side of the equation. So when it says a, b, and c, those are usually numbers. So an example would be something like this. That would be standard form. There's a couple rules for standard form. It actually makes it a lot nicer. You can't have fractions. You can't have a negative a value, and it has to be lowest common terms. So, for example, if I had 6x plus 9y plus 15 equals 0, all three of these could be divided by 3. So the idea is if I divided everything by 3, the 0 is still 0. This would become 2x plus 3y plus 5. That would be the acceptable form. This would not. You just have to convert it. For another example would be if you had like negative 2x plus 3y plus 5 equals 0. This is negative. The first term negative, which is not allowed. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply everything by negative 1. So this will become positive 2x, negative 3y, negative 5 equals 0. The reason we're able to do this is because when it equals 0, you're changing everything in the equation by multiplying it by the same thing. So again, this would be okay, this would not. The last example would be if there was fractions, so like 0.5x plus 3.5y minus 2.5 equals 0. This would not be okay because there's decimals. I'm going to multiply everything by 2 so that I can get rid of those decimals. This would be 1x plus 7y minus 5 equals 0. That's okay, that's not okay. The last would be if it was arranged wrong. This is not standard form. I'd have to rearrange it. So I'm going to rearrange it by moving the y to the other side. 0 equals 3x minus y plus 4. This is okay. I could just write it the other way and it would be fine as well. So when you're dealing with equations, usually it's rearranging is the biggest thing. And then just checking for those 3 rules of no fractions, no negative a, which is the number in front of x, and it has to be lowest common terms. This one's the least common, it happens the least, but you need to be aware of it. A lot of times it gets overlooked. The only reason standard form is useful is for questions that are like this. It's a very specific type of question. It's a little harder to write in y equals mx plus b, so we're going to look at this one and do it. Pascal saves loonies and toonies. The value of his coins is $24. So I need to write like an equation for this. So I'm going to say like the total value was $24. I can say like 1 loonie plus 2 toonies equals $24. So the idea is that for this is the number of loonies. Two O's in loonies. Number of loonies, and this is the number of toonies, right? Toonies isn't spelled with a W. Toonies. So the idea is that whatever the number of toonies is, I would multiply it by the $2 so I can find the total value. This equation represents all the possible answers. There are like more than one possible answer. But when we write it like this, or like this, oops, sorry, 24, it's in standard form and it's good. If I rearranged it to make it like y equals mx plus b, I could make it like L equals negative 2t plus 24. So looking at this, it's a little bit easier to see how it would work. So the number of loonies would be either I can have 24, or for every toonie that I add, it's going to subtract 2 from the number of loonies. Again, this way is easy to see because it's written like this, so it logically makes sense. Loonies plus toonies equals total. This way is a little weirder, but is the same thing. So the suggestion is that if you get questions like this, If you get questions like this, like these word problems where it's easier to write it this way, that's totally fine. But usually if you're going to graph the data, you need to change it into y equals mx plus b so you can actually do the graph properly. Yeah, we did this whole thing. So this one, could Pascal have 6 toonies and 8 loonies? The way we would check that is either using our graph or the equation. So let's do the first one, 6 toonies and 8 loonies. So 6t, 8l. So I'm going to take that original equation and I'm going to sub in those values to see if it works. So 1 times 8 plus 2 times 6 minus 24. So that's 8 plus 12 minus 24. That is equal to -4. That is not correct. It doesn't work because it should have equaled to 0. That's what our equation said. So that doesn't work. I think the other way was if you had 8 toonies and 6 loonies. Let's try that way instead. So I'm going to say 1, 6 plus 2, 8 minus 24. So 6 plus 16 minus 24. That's 0. That works. So this is possible. This is not possible. So the main thing to take away from this is setting up standard form questions, being able to rearrange if you need to, and knowing that you can set up a question in standard form, but usually you change it to y equals mx plus b so that you can actually graph it. That's it.